Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 80 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdown show. My name is Impetus, and today I am joined by my co-hosts, Court and Saint Kabir. We are going back to the basics with today's episode, but before we get into that, Court, what have you been up to in and out of Destiny 2 last week?
Hello lads, hope we're all doing great this week. Great to be all back again. Some GMs and dungeons for me. It seems like the servers and the crafting, all that kind of nonsense has kind of been mitigated. Being able to play the game as opposed to, say, this time last season where it was like, I'll go play something like DMC. But I am in that groove right now, which is a great feeling. And after typing up the script with you guys, really excited to talk about some basics. But yes, completed some one Master Bridge encounter, and I did get that fun roll for Word of Crota, that's destabilizing rounds and Dragonfly. Want to hear our thoughts on those weapons? Listen to episode 79. Did play some private PvP matches with Otto and some friends. Had a lot of fun just messing about and causing much grief with my Gemini Jester's invis build to Otto, and it was just a lot of fun. Certified hee
You're
moment.
in the air! From 30 feet away! What do you mean?
All right. Saint, what have you been up to?
A couple more Crota runs this week. Did a run on my Titan, did one on my Warlock, and I'm hoping to round things out with a run on my Hunter either tonight or tomorrow night, because I only need one more piece of Oversoul Essence to get my Necrochasm, so we're getting there. The increased drop rate has been nice. I've been seeing, for myself and for teammates, definitely an increase in that. Still haven't seen anybody get the Oversoul Essence jackpot yet in person, but I'm hearing that it's out there, which is great. I still need to do my Bridge Master Challenge clear because I've been out a lot this week. I've been shopping for a new car. My wife's car got totaled. Luckily, she's fine, but was not exactly planning on buying a new car this week, so that's kind of occupied most of my would-be gaming time this weekend. Impetus, how about you, man?
Doing a little bit of everything. So made some preliminary kind of raid-focused builds for my Warlock, based around 3 exotics: Lunafaction boots, Cenotaph mask, and boots of the Assembler. Boots of the Assembler plus Lumina, I should say. So all 3 of these builds will eventually go up in our Discord server once I finalize some mods and fragments, but just starting to map out some of those builds and what I might use those for. Did do the Master Crota challenge with Court and our raid crew. Really happy with that. And then hopped into Trials this weekend. Didn't really have a lot of expectations about going flawless for the heavy GL, but just thought I'd pick up some loot. I think I made it 3 wins before I got hit with some mercies. So ran the flawed Trials card all the way up to 7 wins. May pick it up tomorrow to keep running for more loot, but that's what I have been up to in Destiny 2. All right, let's keep things going here. Saint, who do we have to thank this week?
As always, we want to give a big shout out to our sponsors and everybody else that supports the show, specifically a Modern Viking, Askian Monk, Bryce and Roney, Deacon, I'm K Rose, Moonlight, and This Moment. If you would like to also support the show, you can check out Patreon at DestinyMassiveBreakdowns.com and click on the link to Patreon, where you get access to members-only channel in our Discord, some behind-the-scenes info, episode input, all that kind of stuff, some Q&A, stuff like that. You can also support the show by leaving us reviews and feedback, messaging us on Discord, leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, anything like that. Always helps spread the word of the show. Honestly, thank you to everybody that even just tunes in and listens each week. We appreciate each of you for supporting the show, no matter how you do it. All right, Court, what are we talking this week? Episode 80.
Yes, we've got a little small Patreon Q&A. We've got just one big highlight anyway for the last week's TWID. But the main meat and potatoes of this particular episode is going to be our PvE Basics 101. We thought for at least for this season, we're kind of drying up in terms of typical content to speak about. So we're going to go back and do our kind of redux, our kind of re-improvement to sort of PvE basics. And this week we're going to talk about grenades. Everything related to grenades, everything to do with grenades. Just give a big kind of overarching kind of how grenades are doing in the sandbox right now. Just giving kind of some technical details related to grenades, scorch, what things give suppression, jolting, all that kind of jazz. So yeah, really excited to talk about that. So that'll be slightly later on. In terms of housekeeping and some kind of podcast updates, we've got 2 here. So I spoke about the Gold Tusk aerial maneuver, whatever you want to call it, combo last week. It turns out I was actually looking at some kind of old, not completely accurate testing. So when I was, so the testing was made when I was on holiday. So I was backtracking through some old science chat on the Discord, and I picked up on, yes, this is the combo to do, use Gold Tusk aerial combo, but I must have completely missed out a section. So I blame me being on holiday in a hot tub. So the Aegis Relic, who does a lot of like DPS strats, kind of fundamental basics to DPS and damage scenarios. He's got a big spreadsheet, which you can see on the Destiny spreadsheets link tree. He did clarify that he had the wrong info, and that's since been rectified on his sheets. So just to really clarify here that the Gold Tusk aerial combo actually doesn't do more damage than Surrounded Bequest. In terms of Crota, when we speak about these sword damage scenarios, we're just talking about Crota here. As it stands, Surrounded Bequest is one of the best. It's not the easiest though, because you have to kind of set it up with how Surrounded works. You don't get a lot of ads during the Crota fight. So yeah, that remains the highest. Gold Tusk does still do very good damage. It's up there, like top 5, just with the fast swing speeds you can do with the Gold Tusk, and that's just for hunters. But it's certainly not it's not as out of band as originally perceived to be. We also have a little comment here about a certain bow that is dropping for GMs. That's the pre-Astananix 4. Probably butchered that, but it's fine. So Saint, you put the comment here. What's the vibe with that now?
Yeah, we're kind of harsh on this initial review as a Nightfall weapon, comparing it to Stride and Whistle, which had been pretty much a playlist weapon and was seen very comparable, and there just was not a lot of differentiation there. So I'm going to follow this up with a bit more of a positive caveat on there is something that this weapon has to offer that is novel and unique, at least. It turns out that the submunitions that drop, the little to SO bolts that drop from the wildcard origin trait, count as weapon damage. So that means that they can proc things like incandescent and shoot to loot. I don't think this fundamentally, makes this all of a sudden way better than Stride and Whistle if you already have one of those, but it's something. It sets it apart, even if just a little bit, with kind of a fun interaction here. We'll give that one to you. All right. It's not all negatives. All right. There's some uniqueness there, which now honestly makes me want to get an incandescent version of this, even if it only comes into play once a strike. At least I know that one time that I could have had to kill another acolyte, I didn't, because my little submunitions got my back.
You got tonight and tomorrow to go grab that. You better hurry up.
Yeah, I know. I gotta do some more. Gotta do some more GMs this week and a bridge challenge. I gotta catch up, dude. I got so much. This to-do list keeps getting longer. But
busy stuff for Zane here. Yeah, goodness sakes.
For now, let's talk about some updates in the TWID. Just a couple of things we want to hit on here. Really, the main one is Foundry focusing. Starting in Season 23, next season, the 4 original Foundries of D2, Hake, Amalan, Suros, and Viced, are going to get Foundry focusing. So this is going to include weapons from Season 16 all the way up to Season 19, and you can focus them at Banshee, and they will also be removed from the world loot pool. Just general world loot. Legendary engram decryption can no longer decrypt into any one of these weapons. There are 2 featured foundries that will rotate on a daily basis. Every time you focus one of these engrams, it's going to cost you 3 gunsmith engrams, which we'll talk about more in just a second, and 5,000 glimmer. The Season 20 foundry weapons will remain in the loot pool until the final shape, when they also get added in this system. So basically it's just kind of like running on a few season delay there. And then there's also going to be Field Forged Foundry, which are going to be added into the pool at that time, which has been kind of been a new foundry this year. The Gunsmith Focusing will also replace the 6 count weapon section, because right now he has kind of like 2 chunks of like featured weapons, and then this like other section of weapons. They also add that there's going to be more. Sorry, I have a cat just trying to get to my keyboard right now. There's a little sabotage moment going on. There's going to be more ways to get these engrams for the gunsmith, because 3 engrams is like kind of a big price, and that kind of has to deal with different public events, world chests, things like that. Another thing I wanted to throw in right at the end here is that I think that a lot of people were hoping to see more foundries added in sooner, or like less of a delay between the seasons and when the focusing gets added in. But something that was pointed out just, I think yesterday, I was reading through the chat, was all of these weapons being removed from the world loot pool actually is going to have a pretty big impact on the fact that your chances of getting one of these newer weapons just went way up. I mean, we're talking, I want to say there was like 40 something weapons from season 16 to 19 between all the different foundry basics. So it's maybe not as quite as focused as it could have been, or quite up to date with the new world loot as it could be. But at the same time, it will have this kind of cascading effect where, because they are removed to the gunsmith exclusively and out of that world drop loot pool, your chances of actually getting that new heliocentric sidearm or new fusion, right, that we've been talking about, is actually way better than it has been in the past few seasons. Any comments on focusing here, lads? Yeah.
Very good points there. I don't have much else to add. That's always been my biggest grievance, and like we talked about it, Saint, when you were away, Impetus, on one of the episodes recently, where, okay, it doesn't really, they haven't explicitly said this is going to apply to, say, this season's foundry weapons, but it's just, there are foundry weapons that, because they're in such a large loot pool, I want to get them, but I can't really farm them. I can't focus them. It's just really difficult to get them in the first place. So yeah, these changes are very welcome. And reading between the lines, I guess this is going to be a permanent addition to the game, and they just keep enhancing it. They keep adding more into them. So yeah, thumbs up.
Nox Perennial, that is the fusion that I was trying to think of. We've been talking about.
Yes.
We keep talking about how it's like such a great weapon that is really unique in its slot and a good place in the meta, and yet it is almost impossible to get. So next season, you can finally get yourself a actually good Nox Perennial for your top slot fusion.
And hopefully you can, if you're still without one, get a decent funnel web, as that has been probably one of the biggest highlights of that original set of world loot. I know there are still plenty of people in my own clan, for an example, who've been chasing that subsistence frenzy or subsistence adrenaline junkie role. So yeah, hopefully those gunsmith engrams drop like candy, and you guys can focus on the days that Viced is one of the rotating foundries there. So yeah, good quality of life change.
Oh, funnel web.
Funnel web.
Are somehow a world drop weapon. How? Who knows?
Or Cantata for the PvP players, right? I mean, yeah, that initial set of world loot was just crazy strong.
Dude, that thing has got time payload on it. I like that for a PvE side.
That's
even
true.
that Hank Kenny you just mentioned.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
And that's the big irony, is that if you didn't play during season 16, when Funnelweb was reasonably, it was dropping quite well. But as they added more into the loot pool for the world drops, there was no way you were going to get that god roll for funnel web. Like the more the seasons kept coming along, they just added more into that loot pool. So like funnel web. We don't talk about funnel web now because I suppose we've all got our roles now, but we can't exactly recommend it because it's in this, or it at least was after next season, in this huge bloated world drop pool. So good changes.
Goodness. Good changes. All right, let's move on to our Patreon Q&A segment. We just asked one question of the patrons over on Patreon, and that question was, what are your thoughts on build crafting now that we're at the halfway point of the Lightfall year? Had some great responses here. We'll just kind of go down the line. So Deck, and I apologize, I'm probably going to mispronounce your name, Grenayed quoted, or we're in agreement on this, that build crafting in Destiny is great. It really keeps us engaged to try new builds or see what other people are running. Big shout outs to D2 Armor Picker, D2 Foundry, D2 Damage Generator, and of course Quartz Infographics. I think mostly what I'd like to see is PvE changes to Stasis and ways to lock my loadouts, because I often tend to bump the controller and change the names/symbols. That's got to be frustrating for our controller users. That's not something I've experienced on mouse and keyboard, but yeah, that would be a little bit annoying to do that on accident repeatedly.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it would also prevent you from, I would say overriding, but you have to hold interact to override. So I guess that's not as much of a control, but it is kind of annoying to cycle through 17 different color tiles to get back to that perfect purple shade for your void loadout that you need.
For those that don't know, it is a thing that you can tweak with a lot more specifically on DIM. Now, I know not everyone has access to DIM, or say if you are on an actual console, you may have to use a mobile app for DIM. I'm not sure how accessible it is through the mobile app, but at least on the desktop, you can go to create a loadout and tweak with those icons. And that's what I do, because I can't be dealing with the one tab to the left to change the color, and then right to change the icon or wherever it is. And it's not great. But build crafting. Can we all just sit here and just really gush at how loadouts have been such a great thing that they've added to the game. Yes, Lightfall was pretty mid in terms of content, in terms of story, but the quality of life stuff has been just amazing, and that's one of my all-time favorites that they've added to the game. Is one click to a loadout to change pretty much instantly. And now we've had DIM tweaking loadouts and applying loadouts, but that does take time. I think as the games got larger, as these apps kind of get larger themselves, they've certainly took a lot longer recently, in recent times, since Witch Queen anyway. I've noticed that, and obviously you can't tweak it while you're in the middle of a raid. You can't go from, say, a Sunbracer Warlock to going to a Voidwalker Warlock. It's not as easy. You have to sit there and change it. Whereas with these loadouts, I could sit here and gush about them all day, but I know we've got other topics at hand today.
That's definitely the same opinion that Zugashi shared of how build crafting got expanded on, yes, with the actual loadout system for sure, and in a more broad and easier to approach way. And that for me is really nice, of course, of at least having it be accessible to people getting into the game for the first time or coming back to the game. I think we're going to be seeing a good portion of that population, probably, with Final Shape blooming and Cade's return. Obviously, he was a big part of the game for that portion that he was around as a more active character and was a draw for a lot of people. So, yeah, having that system kind of fleshed out at the start of Lightfall and then getting enhanced, tweaked necessarily for folks that will be coming back a bit closer to the Final Shape is definitely a good thing.
Yeah, I'm following up on Zug's question here just a little bit. Do you guys think that we are going to get, or, kind of alternate question here, how many new mods do you think we're going to get in the Final Shape? I'm talking
I hadn't even considered that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even consider that we would get new ones. I don't know, man. I mean, we'll have the raid ones, of course.
I mean, we got those 2 new mods last season.
Yeah.
Powerful Attraction and the other one, which escapes me. Elemental Charge, where you pick up elemental pickups to get your armor charge. So those were either they were already in the pipeline at that stage anyway, or they were kind of really quickly implemented into the game. But maybe I would maybe expect 1 or 2 new mods every other season, but it doesn't feel like we've kind of reached that stage to make that impression that we're getting new mods. To be honest, I saw I can't remember who you were replying to, Saint, but I can remember you were replying with that exact kind of question of, do you think or you were replying to someone asking about combat mods. I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, I was talking to Riss about this on Twitter.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was just like, I don't know. I want more combat mods, but then it's like, what exactly do we need to fill some gaps? Because I see a lot of comments about, we should just bring back Font of Might back, elemental, those elemental balls, can't remember the name of them. Warmind cells as well, because with this season we've got the elemental orbs you can pick up. They're pretty much mini Warmind cells. Mm-hmm. But what do you guys think we need? What mods do you think we kind of require to at least fill the gaps? It's like, is there anything there that's currently missing?
I mean, I think
in terms of mods?
Whenever we came out with the new subclass systems and the new mod systems, so much of the elemental wells was moved into subclasses, basically, with all your different subclass item things, void breaches, solar sprites, etc., etc. I think that it would be interesting to see maybe one new combat mod that bridges the gap for each one of those. So, like, let's say 4 or 5 mods total, with, one mod being related to each like elemental thing, that having some additional effect, or just like a little way to kind of like bridge that gap between your subclass and your mod set would be nice. Like Elemental Charge is really nice, but that's just kind of like a generic one. I'm thinking something that would like a mod specifically for doubling down on like grenade regen or something like that from fire sprites, or whatever that may be, for strand tangles, etc., like increasing the increasing your tangle like explosion radius, or I don't know what it would be, but yeah, just some kind of combat mod that would bridge the gap a little bit between those subclass little item things and your mod set, more or less.
I can't think of a gap right now. Granted, I'm on the spot thinking about this, but there's nothing that's coming to mind that really I feel like I need represented on the mod side. Truthfully, I feel like the artifact has really improved since Lightfall. I think that there's just been a lot more freedom for the team that's working on that to experiment with stuff, try new things. So I have a lot more faith in the artifact, I guess, is kind of what it comes down to. And I feel like there's always going to be something that's satisfying to play with / explore in the artifact mods at this point in time, that I don't look at the default set and think, oh, it's lacking. Like it's got a good foundation, and there's some really fun things that I get to play with every season that's different. There's an incentive to play with a different element. In the case of this season, we got a series of orbs tied again to specific elements that I get to play with and kind of interact with in a way that's really interesting. So I don't feel like the base system needs improvement, to be honest. I wouldn't say no to extra mods, but there's nothing that I can point to definitively and say my playstyle is lacking in this specific area, and we need a mod to cover up for that.
Yeah.
Or a system of mods.
Another interesting thing to think about is the way that they can use the artifact as a test bed for future development. We just saw this, to your point about the artifact mod set improving in the way that it is just like generally ubiquitous across your playstyle, rather than like breach and clear. It's like, okay, it's grenade launcher season. Go get your GLs. It's like way more open than that now, to your point, Impetus. And I wonder if any of this orb business or any of that stuff is like kind of is this a test bed? Like, is there some kind of anticipation about where this is going? Because all the elemental orb stuff seems like a ridiculous amount of tech to make function for just to use it in an artifact like one time, right? Which I don't know what their like long-term plan or intention is for that, but definitely seems like it could be test grounds for future whatever they want to do with it.
I think they are test grounds because we've seen it before with like older artifacts. Now I'm thinking, so like I was going to bring up the point of those elemental orbs, so Void, Arc, and Solar. Obviously, they then kind of softly interact with, or kind of they're under the same ballpark as Tangles and Stasis Shards, even though they're also, you know, elemental pickups themselves. But yeah, I think to your point about the tech of those things, I think they could be, maybe not in the near future, but certainly in the far future, that they could be advanced combat mods, where you equip a mod, and whatever subclass you are on, it'll spawn one of these elemental orbs. So I think that's fertile ground. The other things, maybe not so much for mods, kind of getting off a little bit off topic, but it kind of relates to abilities. The mods from Season 20, Untangler, upon destroying a tangle with a strand weapon, it suspends enemies damaged by an explosion. There's another artifact mod that I could see be turned into either a subclass specific aspect or a fragment in the future. So yeah, to your kind of, to really highlight your point that the artifact mod being used for testing grounds, absolutely, always has been.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me anyway, I think elemental orbs are certainly, they feel a little bit different to the other types of mods that we've seen in the artifact, which leads me to believe this could be something that they're kind of thinking about. They may flesh out in the future and just make them combat mods.
Yeah. We've got two more responses here. Bryce does bring up a good, I think, area of improvement necessarily for our mod system, where he says the affinity system is great for stuff with surges, reserves, and scavs, but it becomes a hassle sometimes with things involving dexterities, unflinchings, and targeting mods in PvP. If I've equipped a weapon, I'm obviously going to attach the necessary mods for the affinity of that weapon. This system makes changing weapons on the go a hassle if a loadout isn't already created for it. A simple change of a hand cannon means touching nearly every piece of armor in some cases. What are your thoughts on this aspect of build crafting? Would a simplification to attaching necessary mods for weapons be desired? Worth it? Something along the lines of press X to apply PvE mods for this weapon, and your armor fills with a scavenger, a loader, a reserve, and a finder. You could still do exactly what is currently in the live system, but this new option to fill your slots for one affinity would exist alongside of it. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a hassle in PvP, as I've found out playing Trials, wanting to swap things, but it's definitely also an issue in PvE if you ever want to change your heavy weapon. I've always forgotten to swap to the relevant surges, and all of a sudden my filled up 3 times solar surges are no longer relevant for my Arc Adept Hothead because I forgot that it's a different element. So yeah, this is definitely an area of improvement. And this is, I guess, if there was a gap, I'd want it to be addressed here. But again, not really, I don't know if that's the case of like new mods or just additional tweaks, mechanics implemented into the loadout system. I don't actually know how easy this would be to fix, but it is certainly an inconvenience that has been, I guess, a holdover from the pre-loadout system as well, now that I think about it.
I think at a baseline, having more loadouts would help alleviate this problem. Like we'd have 10 for PvE and 10 for PvP, or however many, you know, if you just get 20 and you can have 18 for PvP. But yeah, I can see the point here, like almost like a smart kind of refresh to your mods, and just press a button to make the game do what, instead of me having to filter through, okay, I need to do this and that. Yeah, no, I think this would be a great kind of addition to the game. But yeah, to your point, like technically, could they make this work to operate and work in game? Yeah, I'm not a dev, but I would love to see it. I would definitely love to see this.
Yeah. I definitely get why they went down to elements, right? Because like he starts at the beginning. It does make things more succinct, right? It does cut our mod number down, which is nice. But to the point of multiple loadouts, I've literally for the Crucible explicitly before, I had 2 versions of Peacekeeper's loadout at one point. And almost the only thing that was different between them is just the mod sets, like you're talking about. There was like a one that had, I want to say it was, an arc sniper and a kinetic SMG, and then the opposite one was a kinetic sniper with a void SMG. So all of the mods basically would just switch out between the 2 elements for the 2 loadouts. And it was a pain because I obviously would like to have more than just 3 loadouts for the Crucible. But given that I'm predominantly playing, PvE, I'm just not willing to give it up. So I kind of agree with the idea that if we maybe had a few more loadout slots, it wouldn't feel as bad, because then it's not as painful to set up 2 slots for like essentially the same kit with different armors. Yeah.
See, that's the exact same problem I have with PvP, and it's only PvP. PvE is a little bit more... I've got loadouts for all the elements, but they're not related. Like, I may have 2 or 3 Void Hunter builds, but they don't have much overlap, whereas with the PvP sides, there is a lot of overlap. So I'm just kind of thinking, if we can't get more loadouts, and within one loadout, can I make variants of? So you've still got the foundational, I still want to use this weapon and that exotic, but then I want to tweak between variant A or B or C, just within that loadout, just to kind of really help out that problem.
And it's also, I feel like this is really brought to the forefront in PvP. I know Bryce plays a bunch of Crucible, and obviously, I think, kind of why this came to his mind, but you have so much more time. Like, if I'm playing through a GM and it's not going how I want it to go, I'll probably just finish that one mission, go to orbit, and then I'm going to sit there with my fire team and talk for 2 or 3 minutes while we all adjust our loadouts before we go back in to do another GM run. Versus if I'm in a trials match and it's round 3 and I realize that I have picked the completely wrong loadout to combat whoever this opponent that I'm facing is, they're playing super aggressively and I need to get off my like occluded finality like in the next 30 seconds, you're under a lot more pressure to like get to a better, closer range, more defensive loadout in 10 seconds versus, several minutes that you probably have in between like raid encounters or GM runs or et cetera, lost sector clears that you're trying to get your times out on. You always have time at PvE.
Yeah, it's a struggle. All right, that was all of our responses to the build crafting question. Thank you for everyone. Did also want to shout out Adam's Downboy, of course, giving us just a personal question that followed up on a previous hot food, cold food debate. He's wondering, would the answer change if we included drinks? And he specifically says, including beers into the mix. Really got to twist the knife there, buddy. I said hot food. I think I'm still sticking with the hot food. I'll give up beer for coffee, tea, hot chocolate. I'm sure there's got to be like warm alcoholic beverages, right? I'll do some research and figure out what kind of warm alcoholic beverages I can have. But I'm sticking with hot food. How about you guys?
I think I'm the same. So there's... It's maybe not a thing all year round, but at least during autumn or fall and winter periods of the year, you can get cider, spiced apple cider, which you can actually warm up and heat up just on a hob and just drink it warm. So yeah, I think I'm okay there. If I still want to drink cider, which is my preferred alcoholic beverage, then yeah, I'm still going hot food. Hot chocolate as well. That's my big thumbs up.
I think for the sake of my health and life longevity, I've got to go hot foods, because if I pick cold and I'm just eating nothing but cold cut sandwiches and drinking beer every day of the week, I'm not long for this world, man. Like, I'm gonna really put on a lot of weight and just not be doing well, like, real quick. So I want to say cold foods and just eat sandwiches and drink beer for the rest of my life, but I know if I want to live for longer than another 3 years, I should probably say hot foods. Plus, like Court said, it's about that time of the year. I've heard many people refer to it as wassail, which is basically, like Court is describing, it's just spiced apple cider. Often we'll have a little bit of rum or whiskey in that little cider mix up there. So I think I could get by on just having a little hard spiked apple cider, spiced warm drinks every now and then, and just not really drink much in the summers here. It would be tough, but I'd at least live for more than another few years. All right, let's get into the main focus of our show today, which is Grenades 101. We're going to basically talk about each element, spend more or less time on grenades that within the element, things that affect these grenades, like your aspects, fragments. We'll throw in a mention of some specific exotics, talk about pros, cons, and kind of like our picks basically for each element and their strengths and weaknesses. Shout out to Impetus for our topic today when we were really digging into just where we want to talk about PvE in-game. This was his idea. So Impetus, I'm going to give it to you to kick us off with void grenades.
Alrighty, let's do it. Yeah, so we do have a lot of representation in the aspects and the fragments. Not to mention not to forget, of course, our armor as well here for void grenades. So when we think of aspects that modify void grenades, we've got one for Titan, one for Warlock. Titans have controlled demolition. That simply is void ability damage, and volatile explosions apply volatile to enemies. So this, of course, affects any grenade that a Titan has selected if they are using controlled demolition. So that is a great way for Titans to apply volatile to enemies without having to spec too much into it. They just simply run an aspect. Warlocks, we have the Chaos Accelerant aspect, which enhances certain grenade types, 4 of them to be exact. We will get to each of those in just a time. I'm not going to run through those just yet, but those are the aspects on Void 3.0 that touch on grenades. And then let's get into some fragments here. We've got 3 that do affect certain things here. So the first one, Echo of Undermining. Void grenades apply the weaken effect on hit for 5 seconds, and that does come with a minus 20 discipline malice as well. So again, another way to apply a Void 3.0 verb to your grenades by selecting this fragment. We've got the Echo of Remnants fragment that modifies certain grenade types. This being the Vortex grenade will last 50% longer, Spike grenade will last 40% longer, the Void Wall grenade will last 60% longer, and Axion bolts just last longer. We don't actually have an exact percentage for how much longer this fragment affects Axion bolts, but they are also included in this. Our final fragment that modifies grenades is Echo of Expulsion. Void ability kills cause enemies to explode, dealing up to 160 damage in a 7-meter radius. This comes with a bonus of plus 10 intellect. So this again, just modifying any void grenade that you have, allows enemies to explode when they die to that grenade. All right, let's get into the grenade types here. Again, these are accessible to all classes, but they do get modified by some aspects or fragments where they may have an exotic armor. We will, of course, mention and discuss that if that is the case. Court, I will pass it over to you to start with our first grenade type for Void.
Yeah, so we're going to go alphabetical here. So Axion Bolt is our first one. Cooldown is 152 seconds. Which actually puts it at joint highest with Vortex. So that is releasing up to 2 tracking orbs. And for Warlocks, if you're using the Chaos Accelerant aspect, it adds a 3rd orb, and all orbs track faster. Magnetic is a cooldown of 105 seconds. That's the one where it sticks and then explodes twice. And again, Warlocks have Chaos Accelerant aspect to enhance it. It now releases a short-range Void Blast that applies volatility. It can be held for 4.5 seconds. That's akin to pre-Void 3.0. I can't remember the name of it. If you could remind me there, Imtis.
Handhold super
Yes. Yeah, that's it. So exactly like that. If you're yearning for a handheld supernova, that is your go-to here. That's the magnetic grenade. Up next is scatter. Cooldown of 105 seconds again. That releases submunitions on impact, and once again, Warlocks have the Chaos Accelerant aspect to enhance it. The submunitions track enemies within 5 meters. Warlocks also have the Nothing Manacles exotic armor, which grants an extra scatter grenade ability charge, and scatter grenades receive Chaos Accelerant's tracking bonus. It doesn't stack with Chaos Accelerant's bonus, so you can't stack both of those, just the tracking. Up next is our sticky boy. We can stick a spike grenade on walls. Cooldown of 121 seconds. Nothing much to really say here. Pretty self-explanatory. When it comes to kind of damage output, it's nothing compared to, say, Destiny 1 era, but it's still here. It's in the game. Next up, we've got Suppressor. Now, this is one of our kind of main verb for at least for the Void subclass. This is one that suppresses enemies. That's your Suppressor Grenade. And that's cooldown of 121 seconds. And that suppresses for 10 seconds. Now, also, you can then utilize a lot of aspects and fragments. Again, we're not going to go too much detail here in terms of synergy, but suppression is the big one of the 6 keywords for the Void subclass. Very important one here. Suppression affects all enemies except champions and bosses. And so that suppression effect just kind of basically it's similar to slow, similar to blinding effect, just kind of makes them more susceptible. They stop damaging you, and yeah, something that we'll come back and discuss when we do abilities and sort of general sandbox stuff. Is the suppression effect. Next up is Void Wall. Yes, that is still in this game. Cooldown of 121 seconds, and that's the one that spawns a horizontal wall of void energy. And finally is the Vortex. Again, shares the highest cooldown of 152 seconds. It's the one where it sucks enemies in after detonation. Enhanced by the Warlock Chaos Accelerant aspect, 70% increased radius. It burns for an additional second and pulls enemies inwards earlier. And Warlocks also have Controverse Hold, a piece of exotic armor. While charging a grenade, you get 20% damage resistance. Grenade hits proc Chaotic Exchange, granting 2000% in PvE. Additional base grenade regeneration rate for 1.75 seconds, meaning it just recharge a lot faster. 2000% is a crazy amount. And 4-second cooldown between activation. So you can't, with Vortex grenades specifically, so Controverse Hold can be used for a lot of these grenades, but specifically when it comes to Vortex, you can proc this Chaotic Exchange twice with Vortex grenades because they last a lot longer, as long as the enemy gets hit by the initial explosion and the last few ticks of Vortex grenade. All right, I'll throw it back to the rest of the crew here. What were we vibing? What grenades are we thinking for Void? What could maybe go and what could stay?
Take it away, Saint. What do you got?
I think that if I'm just gonna chop one right off the block here, it's probably Scatter Grenade, because I see Axiom Bolt as like just kind of another version of Scatter Grenade that has just like the tracking built in. And the reason I think I would also say Scatter Grenade is, outside of like a few exceptions, there's nothing that I would want to use Scatter Grenade for that Void Wall or Vortex wouldn't do better, pretty much. I think that, like, obviously Suppressor and Spike are at least very unique in the way that they function, in the area that they cover. And then same thing for like Void Wall and Vortex. They, they're a little bit similar, but again, at least like there are different scenarios that I may want to use more Void Walls in than a Vortex Grenade. I also, until we were kind of looking over all the different damage numbers today, was pretty surprised by how much damage a Void Wall Grenade can do. I think it gets looked over a little bit in our current sandbox. Like, I don't think Void Walls are super popular, but I'm definitely going to try to give those more of a try, knowing that they can hit for almost double the total damage that like a vortex grenade could hit for. Only problem is vortex has that, the way that it draws enemies in. It's a massive AoE. It's easy to place. It's probably going to be the top pick for me, especially considering when I'm working on undermining. So I think that there are some times where you may want to go towards a lower grenade cooldown. Vortex is at 152 seconds, which is really high. But yeah, again, just so incredibly effective for landing that easy debuff. Imtis, what about you? What top pick? What would you chop? How you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, Warlocks, we got really lucky when it comes to Void 3.0. Just a lot of support for grenades, both in the aspect, fragments, and of course, we've got 2 different exotic armors that interact with particular grenades, or even in the case of Controverse, generally all Void grenades. So we can be a little bit more picky, but we also do have we're supposed to have a little bit more competition, although I don't really see that on the exotic armor side. I think Controverse Hold is far and away superior to Nothing Manacles. And I do think that Vortex Grenade is also far and away superior to all of these other options. I would love to see a little bit more love for suppressor grenades and just suppressing in general, but that's not a verb that our Warlock kit really thrives with. I know that both Titans and Hunters have a little bit better situation for the suppressive verb, maybe to the point where they don't even need a suppressor grenade, but I'll let those 2 fellas chime in on that take. For Warlocks, I mean, yeah, the ability to stop enemies in their tracks as they're charging you with that vacuum effect of the Vortex Grenade is life-saving. It comes up all the time in all levels of content. You've got War Beasts or Thralls charging you. You've got an Arc Knight with that sword and shield rushing you. Throw that grenade. You don't even have to. I mean, it can take some kind of level of skill, but you can deliberately miss the target, throw it to the side, throw it to the back of them, and that vacuum effect will cause them to stop. Sometimes if they can't be staggered, if that modifier is on, it doesn't quite work that way. They might still be rushing, but the vacuum effect will counter that. When the modifier is not in effect, you will just have the enemy straight up stop and get moved directly into the center of the vortex, where they will take the most amount of damage. And that is incredible, right? It's great for proccing all sorts of effects, of course. When we do have Echo of Undermining applying Weaken as well, that makes it really nice for the higher level content. You can start blasting damage at them while they're in the center of that vortex, struggling to move around. Is huge, right? This was basically the Shackle Grenade before we got the Shackle Grenade in an effect, right? And with the Controverse Hold exotic armor allowing that Vortex Grenade to proc twice if they get hit by the initial explosion, that is fantastic for getting over that high cooldown of 152 seconds at Tier 3 Discipline, right? Getting that Chaotic Exchange to proc twice means you get the 2,000% additional increase twice, right? You can afford to have the 152 second cooldown plus the minus 20 discipline that comes with using Echo of Undermining with that exotic armor, right? You can match those malices, and even in some cases overcome them if you're able to still have 100 discipline with Echo of Undermining taking into effect, right? So that is, to me, the best option, right? Remnants also making Vortex Grenades last 50% longer. I mean, there's just so much stacking up in Vortex Grenades' favor that for me, on Warlock, there's no other argument. Even on Hunter and Titan, I would argue there isn't really much of an argument, but I would defer to both of you guys if you can think of a specific example that would be maybe equal to or even superior to Vortex in some cases. But it's really hard for me to look at anything else when there's just so much inherent strength of Vortex and then the additional strengths that come with being on Void Warlock.
So for me, I think Void, out of the 3 light subclasses, obviously Strand and Stasis only have 3 grenades themselves, but for me, Void's probably the least egregious example of we've got too many grenades here. We'll get onto Scorch and solar grenades in a moment here, but I think Void's in a really great spot. I don't think I could pick one example of a grenade that I'm just like, okay, just chop it, get rid of it. because I think they've all got their utility, they've all got their uses, and I'm thinking in both sandboxes, not just for PvE but also PvP. Axiom Bolt, when I look at the damage value, and when I say damage value, it's the absolute baseline. It's not including damage multipliers and combatant multipliers. Axiom Bolt here, for one Seeker is 575 damage, which is one of the weaker. In fact, it's the weakest out of the Void grenades here. However, people use Axiom Bolt a fair amount in PvP. It's got its utility there. So in terms of the weakest, I would either say Scatter or Axiom Bolt, or maybe Magnetic Grenades. But again, I'm hesitant to just focus on one thing and say just get rid of it. In terms of the best, as Impetus was saying there, Vortex is certainly just one of the best Void grenades, if not just in general the best grenades in the game. Originally it never had that pulling enemies towards it, because the Dustfield grenade had that originally way back yonder. So that's now been put onto Vortex. Just a solid staple of a grenade in my builds. Next up for me would be Suppressor Grenades. I still make it work for Hunter, my Void builds. It's part of one of my ultimate Void builds, which you can see on the Discord server. It's just a great utility, and you'll see this trend when I speak about grenades, how much I love utility-based grenades, and how we need more of those, especially in the light sandbox, at least for Arc and Void anyway. Those are my thoughts.
I feel like, another thing we got to mention, it's Overload champs for suppressor grenades, right?
Yes.
Yeah, which it's the only one that out of our our current list that just has an outright counter, which is can't talking about utility core. It's man, that really is so valuable, even if its damage isn't crazy.
And Void only has access, for at least for when you're going up against champions, is Overload with suppression, and then volatile rounds, which obviously not the scope of this breakdown. But Void's a little bit of an anomaly when you are wanted to use it for champion side, because you only really have suppression and volatile rounds. I'm actually just looking at the range of the suppressor grenade, of where it'll apply suppression is 9 meters. Put that in perspective, the size of the Vortex grenades, or at least where it starts pulling enemies in, is actually 5 meters is the size of the Vortex, of the area of effects, and then another 5 meters for when it pulls enemies in. So it's around about the same range of suppressor grenade is the same range of a Vortex plus its pulling radius. So I think that's what kind of put. I do see comments like, suppressor's a bit tame, but I disagree. That damage explosion, the blast of the suppression is it's a good size, and if you've got a bunch of ads in a small tight space, lob out a suppressor grenade. It's only 121 seconds. It's middling in terms of cooldown, and it actually does some good damage. It does better damage than Axiom Bolt. It's 863 to Axion's 575. Again, these are just base values for damage.
Yeah, if the Void Light-bearing Hive can destroy my shit with their suppressor grenades in the Lightblade GM, then something tells me maybe I should be able to do the same thing, right?
Yeah, maybe
I would love to have those
tables,
suppressors.
Huh? Yeah,
that range is not 10 meters. Otherwise, I need to get my measuring tape out, because 10 meters is a lot smaller than I thought.
Yeah, I think theirs is 20 or something like that. It's something extraordinary, but I don't think our suppressors need that. We're doing pretty fine.
Okay. I wouldn't complain. I would not complain.
The biggest, I don't think, we haven't actually mentioned this on our script here. Void Sandbox is very unique because we have something called Devour. And when you keep refreshing Devour, whether that's through the various aspects and fragments, or if you make a kill while you have Devour active, you get grenade energy back. So a lot of these cooldowns, it's 152 seconds for Axion or Vortex. A lot of the time, especially for Warlocks, Warlocks are really feasting when it comes to Void. it doesn't really matter what the cooldown is because you're going to get your grenade back pretty quickly when you've got Devourer up.
Yeah, we've got a lot of freedom in choosing the grenade because the cooldowns are all going to be pretty evened out when you factor in Devour and your Discipline and your Aspects and your Fragments. But yeah, that's a great point. Sorry, Sam, I cut you off there.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, I think my last takeaway point here is I'm going to try to give Void Wall more of a chance next time I'm playing Void, especially when it comes to like single target damage. I could be, it looks really good on paper, and I think I just haven't given enough of a chance in the game. So I'm going to try to give Void Wall more of a chance when I'm on weekend build, undermining build, when I'm trying to use my Void Grenades a lot, and see how that fares, It'd
be interesting to see how that wave effect handles the terrain changes, because that to me has been the biggest thing that holds me back. But there are spaces where it would be really lethal. I think we've got 3 battleground GMs, and those boss rooms are all very flat surfaces where you maybe have like some pillars, of course, in the Mars one, but in the other 2, it's pretty wide open spaces. And so a wave frame or a void wall type grenade, a wall type grenade, I should say, because there are other ones on the other elements, could be really lethal if you want to match up your surges and stuff. But yeah, I look at those types of grenades and think, well, I could just use a wave frame, and my wave frame might have something like chain reaction or destabilizing rounds or incandescent on it, where I just get to set things, I get to tie into other verbs. So why do I need to use my grenade to do that when I could have a really great weapon where I have way more shots on a much shorter cooldown, because then I'm just tied to the weapon's RPM as opposed to my discipline stat, right?
For sure. All right, Court, you want to kick us off for our next section here, is solar grenades?
Yeah, so I'll kick us off with the sort of aspects and the fragments here. We've got some exotics, a lot more exotics contained within the solar sandbox, which we'll kind of discuss when we get to grenades as well. But in terms of aspects, once again, warlocks have something that enhances their grenade types. That is your touch of flame. We'll get into the specifics in a second here. Hunters have a little bit of a unique aspect here. You don't get an improved grenade, you get an entirely new grenade. It's the Gunpowder Gamble Improvised Explosive. There's no cooldown here, so it's all about charging up. So solar kills charge up this improvised explosive and readies at 6 charges. To get those 6 charges, solar weapon kills gives you 1. Ignition or scorch kills. So if the ignition or the scorch kills outright, you get 3 charges. Solar ability, so your grenades or your melees, are 4 charges. And your solar super kill is 6 charges, aka a instant charge. So once your improvised explosive is charged up, it replaces your currently equipped grenade, and then this improvised explosive causes a raw ignition. There's no scorches or anything like that. It's just a raw ignition source upon being shot or after a fuse of 3 seconds. The ignition obviously plays into Champion Sandbox. Ignitions can be used for Unstoppables. Scorch is one of the lead-ups to get an ignition. So once you get 100 stacks of Scorch, you get that ignition. But with this improvised explosive, you don't need to go through that whole kind of mini game of getting as many Scorch onto a target, onto your unstoppable champion. Just throw this out and instantly stun. There's a cooldown here of 6 seconds between each kind of deactivation phase of the Gunpowder Gamble. And over on the fragment side, we have 2 here. Ashes, obviously the one that applies increased Scorch stacks, and it's around about 50%, and it's rounded up. We'll talk about them when we go through the individualized list here. And Resolve is grenade kills grant cure ×1, which is another part of the solar verbs, keywords, whatever you want to call it. All right, Imtis, you want to take it away with the grenade types here?
Yes. So we'll start here at the top with Firebolt Grenade. That cooldown is 64 seconds. Fires at up to 4 enemies within 8 0.5 meters, dealing 20 stacks of Scorch, increased to 30 with Ashes per the Seekers that go out from Firebolt. The Touch of Flame aspect for Warlocks enhances this so that the Firebolt now has a 12-meter Seek radius and it can target up to 5 enemies. Moving on to Fusion Grenades, these have a cooldown of 73 seconds. They stick on impact, then explode, dealing 40 stacks of Scorch or 60 with Ashes upon detonation. The Warlock Touch of Flame aspect enhances these so that it now applies a secondary explosion, and this secondary explosion does not apply additional Scorch stacks. Warlocks also have an exotic armor that deals with fusion grenades. That is, of course, the infamous Starfire protocol. You do gain a second fusion grenade charge, and it passively grants 20% additional base fusion grenade regeneration rate. While you're standing in a Well of Radiance or an Empowering Rift, you do grant 2.5% grenade energy per weapon hit, and that also incurs a 0.4 second cooldown between grenade energy gain on that hit, but it grants 20% grenade energy on a weapon kill. Getting a fusion grenade kill will grant you 100% class ability energy. Titans also have a fusion grenade exotic armor in the form of Ashen Wake. Fusion grenades have fastball mod intrinsically and detonate on impact. Kills with fusion grenades grant grenade energy that ranges from 25% to 100% depending on the rank of the enemy. Rank and file giving 25%, and then boss/mini-boss giving 100%. A lot of stuff going on with fusion grenades. We'll keep moving on to the healing grenade. This is our newest solar grenade. That is a cooldown of 91 seconds. It applies 1 cure and 1 restoration for 4 seconds. There is no Scorch involved. For Warlocks, the Touch of Flame aspect enhances this to apply 2 stacks of cure and 2 stacks of restoration for also 4 seconds. The Incendiary grenade has a cooldown of 105 seconds. It is your typical fragmentation grenade, deals 33% more damage to target if they are within 0.5 meters of the epicenter of the grenade explosion, deals 60 stacks of Scorch or 90 with Ashes if they are affected by the blast. And then we have the incredibly named Solar grenade with a cooldown of 152 seconds, detonates and then deals damage over time. The damage over time ticks every 0.3 seconds, and that lasts for a total of 4 seconds. The Scorch stacks on the initial detonation is 10, 21 with Ashes. The damage over time field applies 9 stacks up to 14 stacks with Ashes per second. The Warlock Touch of Flame aspect enhances this so that it now lingers for 2 seconds longer, and the Solar Grenade releases magma orbs that deal additional damage. Warlocks also have an exotic armor piece for solar grenades, the Sunbracers. So specifically the solar grenades, not all solar grenades, the grenade named Solar that also happens to be of the element Solar, have fastball intrinsically and last twice as long, going up to 8 seconds. The powered melee kills will grant 5 seconds of the effect Sunbracers Ready. Using your grenade ability when Sunbracers Ready is active grants the buff of 20,000% additional base grenade regeneration rate for 5 seconds, turning you into a little turret. That is the Solar Grenade. Moving on, we have the Swarm Grenade, a cooldown of 91 seconds, releases 9 seeking drones on impact. Each of those drones deal 5 stacks or 8 with Ashes per the drone detonation. The Thermite Grenade has a cooldown of 121 seconds, creates 4 waves one after another upon landing, 4-second duration. Each wave deals 10 stacks or 20 with Ashes of Scorch. The final grenade here, Trip Mine Grenade, 121 second cooldown, sticks to your surface and then explodes when an enemy is nearby, dealing 40 stacks of Scorch or 60 with Ashes if affected by the blast. Hunters have an exotic armor here, the Young Ahamkara Spine. Intrinsically grants fastball to all solar grenades, but the Trip Mine gains the following bonuses. There is a plus 14% increased explosion damage. The explosion length and width increase to 14 meters. That's up from 10 meters and 7 meters respectively. You also do not suffer any self-damage from the explosion of trip mine grenades. The grenade lasts 30 seconds from 10 seconds, and the trip mine durability is increased to 100 HP with a 50% DR. Solar ability damage coming from either your grenade, your powered melee, or your super grants 33% trip mine grenade ability energy, and the initial scorch tick from abilities also counts for this. Those are your grenade types. There's also 2 exotics that we want to touch on. The Titan Path of the Burning Steps legs. Solar grenade kills immediately grants 4 times solar surge. That's a 25% damage buff there. And then Titans also having the Ashen Wake, which we already mentioned on the fusion grenades. So that is all of your grenade types there. A lot of different options, a lot of numbers being thrown out here in regards to your various scorch stacks. Saint, what are you looking at for solar grenade types when you're thinking about kind of the best option to use? What kind of mechanics, because these do have some very different mechanics for one another despite applying kind of various ranges of scorch stacks, what kind of mechanics tied to the grenade type are you factoring in when you are on your solar subclass?
A lot of times I'm thinking about what is going to ignite, kind of situation, and how am I going to be able to like easily account for igniting a target or whatever the case may be. That being said, I really like, if I want to clear a room, I'm going to be sunspot generating Titan guy. Thermite grenades are really nice for that repetitive, just throwing down waves, and also hits for pretty high total damage if you're landing all, I want to say it's 4 waves, right, of solar energy out there. Another thing I'll say when we're going from kind of like element to element here, a lot of these grenades have lower cooldowns, like a significantly lower average cooldown. I think this probably has to do with, Court brought up Devour and how you're able to really just build into that so quickly. Solar doesn't quite have as much of an instant regen on some of these abilities and stuff like that, so I think that contributes a little bit to the cooldowns on a lot of these grenades being significantly lower, with Solar being the only solar grenade. Again, yeah, really, we gotta change that. That has 150 second cooldown. The others are anywhere from 64 seconds on Firebolt to 121 for like Thermite, Trip Mine. I would say, as far as my like classic utilities go, fusion grenades are really nice, like instant damage, and you can get 60 scorch stacks off of that guy, right? And that is really nice. Usually, if I have an uncharged melee or something else with burning, roaring flames up, it's going to be really easy to get a grenade with that kill and get some of those benefits going that we were just talking about that can be procced off a solar grenade kill. Fusion definitely, even not on Warlock, even on my Titan, I really like that one just for its quick damage. And then I would say after that, healing grenade, right? It's like bring something so incredibly unique to the table. Whereas this kind of goes back to the previous element we were talking about Void. I didn't really feel like Scatter had a huge benefit. The similar feeling is here for Swarm. Swarm can potentially apply, it's 9 drones that can do, I think that's like 8 stacks of Scorch each drone, which is a lot, but it's hard to land every single one of them. And if I want to use a Swarm grenade, I would probably just use that solar grenade, whatever base solar grenade, kind of in its place for that local AoE effect. So that'd probably be my one to go if I was going to pick one of these guys out. Thermite to clear a room, Fusion for that quick pop kill, and then Solar is kind of another general nice one to use with Fusion, and Swarm grenades probably getting the chop. Court, how are you feeling? What are your go-to solar nades? What are you thinking about our list here?
Well, much like you, I build into what can get me that ignition the fastest, so the path of least resistance here. 2 things actually I wanted to bring up before I mentioned that is, of course, Fire Sprites, which is the solar pickup energy. They do grant you 12.5% grenade ability energy on pickup. If someone's rocking Ionic Traces as well, that gives you 12.5% grenade if, say, a Warlock's using Fallen Sunstar. But over back on the solar side, if you're playing into the whole ignition kind of synergy, Blistering grants grenade ability energy based on the enemy rank. If you get ignition kills, won't go into too much detail there because it's split by combatant. And again, kind of getting into more of the ability sandbox than grenades. But yeah, take those into consideration if you do want to play into grenade build. But yeah, for me, this is pretty easy when it comes to what would I chop. Firebolt, swarm grenades, and I think, again, it's a similar kind of problem I have. Yes, Void Wall, Impt has made the point about, just the geometry of the game can be really frustrating to deal with those type of grenades that create a wall of something. And it's the same here with Thermite. It's a second in terms of the best damage dealing grenade. And if you can get the 4 flames to apply Scorch, then yeah, you will get a reasonably good Scorch application, and you can kind of fill in the gap with your abilities. But definitely for me, Swarm and Firebolt, those just feel pretty... Just not really it, Chief, to be honest. To your point, Saint, about swarm grenades, they have the potential to get up to 72 Scorch stacks. That's assuming every one of those drones, the 9 drones, gets the same target, which is not always the case.
Yeah.
And yes, swarms, they do have reasonably low cooldown. Firebolts obviously has the lowest of the cooldowns at 64 seconds here. I just think those two are they're just not really up to the job here when you've got things like fusion grenades and incendiary grenades, trip mines. Obviously, with my for my fellow hunters, young Ahamkar's Spine Arms Exotic is one of the best in the game. You can keep that synergy going. I've talked about builds, the solar builds I've managed to make out of that. It is getting nerfed at some point in the future. I'm not talking about that just now. But yeah, generally speaking, the grenades here are great. It's nice that we do have a healing grenade for that utility. You're tapping into the subclass verbs or the keywords with cure and restoration. But yeah, fusion and swarm just feel pretty mediocre.
Yeah, Thermite would be a lot more lethal, or at least have a little bit more utility if that radius... Sorry, did I say Thermite? I meant Swarm. Swarm grenades would have a lot more utility if the area that the drones kind of stay in upon impact was significantly wider. I understand that would make them quite a nuisance in PvP, so I can understand why it's the same, or why it's the size that it is right now. But I look at that and I just think they're too small. A larger space for those drones to hang would also make them a bit more aggressive in their tracking. They'd have a larger time. Anytime a player or an enemy enters that field, they'd be able to kind of start moving a little bit quicker. Because, yeah, I mean, if you're moving quickly, especially in PvP, you can get through those drones pretty fast, to the point where not all 9 of them will be able to reach you before they detonate. So, I don't know. It definitely feels like it needs to be improved in some regard. As for what I love, I mean, yeah, it's got to be solar grenades right now. Healing grenades, of course, warlocks with our touch of flame. 2 stacks of cure and 2 stacks of restoration is life saving. Pardon the pun. It's what people use on day 1. Contest mode raids for an obvious reason. Keep your teammates alive. Keep yourself alive. Throwing it at your feet. There is, of course, the Ember of Resolve, which is great, but sometimes you need a little bit more than a grenade kill to grant a stack of cures. Sometimes you just need to go all in on healing, and Warlocks can do that the best with the healing grenade. The cooldown's very manageable. Again, if you've got other ways to generate fire sprites, you can really bring that down. Yeah, it's a fantastic option. I think Sunbracers with solar grenades, the specific solar grenades, we should just call them magma grenades. That makes so much more sense, and it's so easily identifiable. Those can be just devastating once you get Sunbracers procced. Really just light up an entire field, lock down an entire area, do crowd control to an extent that you really can't replicate anywhere else. I mean, I think probably Stasis Hunters with Renewal Grasp can probably get that same level of shutdown area denial as well. But yeah, it's a very strong, potent combo for damage. Not going to dwell too much on Starfire Protocol. It's in a much smaller area than it used to be in. That used to be probably the go-to option here. You know, if this is a few months ago that we were doing this episode, I probably wouldn't even be talking about Sunbracers. I'd be talking about Starfire instead. But that has been flipped now. We are in a new era. So I think fusion grenades probably have a little bit more relevance for Titans than they do for Warlocks. They're still an excellent option. Of course, Touch of Flame giving that secondary explosion can be really nice for dealing that single target damage. But yeah, I think I just take Sunbracers and work on getting that kill with the powered melees so that I can spray and pray with solar grenades.
You know, one thing I do want to mention before we move on to another element is Roaring Flames, right? The Ashen Wake kind of key to the loop there, or just generally, you know, Titans using your Roaring Flames kind of on a rounding out our conversation here is a 73% increase in damage, which is nuts. And I'm talking Roaring Flame stacked up times 3. And whenever you do have this stacked up and you're getting that 73% damage increase on your grenade, it's really easy to stack that up whenever you are running around with your mini throwing hammer, right? You're just bonking enemies. You're getting Roaring Flames times 3. All of a sudden, when you throw out, whatever, your fusion grenade or solar grenade, whatever it is, getting that timing down is going to have an insane effect on how often you're going to be able to throw those nades and then how many enemies are going to be able to clear whenever you do throw one of those grenades. So definitely, if you are going to be playing Solar Titan, you need to be capitalizing on making sure that you're, getting a couple of kills before you use the nade to really chunk some damage down on an enemy, especially if you want to have some fun with something like Ashen Wake, even though it's not incredibly practical in the really in-game scenarios. Up to like middling content, you can have a lot of fun with Ashen Wake, just popping some enemies with your little Super Mario fireballs that you can throw at them.
A lot of stuff for Solar. All right, let us move on to Arc. This one's got some fun stuff here. Starting off on the aspect side, Titans have the infamous Touch of Thunder, which enhances certain grenade types that we'll cover in just a second. Warlocks, we don't have a direct grenade aspect, but Electrostatic Mind does give us some help here. Arc ability kills and kills against enemies affected by arc effects create an ionic trace. Ionic traces make you amplified, again, as Court mentioned earlier with Fallen Sunstar. That can help out with getting grenade energy back. Again, that's just arc ability kills and or kills against enemies affected by arc effects. So we can tie into that with our arc grenades there. On the fragment side, one of the best fragments for any grenade ever, we got Spark of Shock here. Arc grenades apply Jolt upon dealing damage. That does come with a -10 malice. Let's be honest, I could probably be a -50 and we'd still be using it on every arc subclass. It is one of the best fragments, and it does make grenades of the arc variety incredibly powerful for a variety of use cases. Crowd control, single target damage, Jolt is just that good. We've also got the Spark of Magnitude. That does increase the duration of the Lightning, Pulse, and Storm grenades specifically. We'll get into that in just a second here, but Saint, can you walk us through the grenade types for Arc?
Yeah, we got another pretty big chunk here, all of our light-based subclasses. Starting off with Arc Bolt, 105-second cooldown. The closest enemy hit creates a chain. Targeting the closest next enemy within 8 meters can chain up to 3 times, but can't chain immediately back and forth between like this same pair of enemies. The Hunters have Lucky Raspberry that they can pair with this. Arc Bolts now chain 4 times, have Intrinsic Disruption, Overload counter. Upon triggering the Jolt chain damage, you gain 20% grenade ability energy. Picking up an Ionic Trace, you gain an additional 5% of grenade ability energy on top of the 12.5% that you would normally get. So a lot of synergy there. Flashbangs, 91-second cooldown, blinds enemies for 5 seconds within an 8-meter radius. Titans using Touch of Thunder will get an additional blind on the the initial bounce of the grenade. So it will blind and then blind again on the explosion, which is good for unstoppable champion counters within 5 meters. Then you got flux grenades, cooldown of 152 seconds, really long one here. No tracking. They stick on impact and give a 67% increase in damage on stuck targets. We've got lightning grenades, 152 second cooldown again, sends out 4 bolts of lightning in a 12-meter cone. Spark of Magnitude will give an extra bolt there, which honestly, this puts out pretty high damage. And then Titans with Touch of Thunder, you will gain an additional grenade charge, just whole other grenade charge outright. And the initial spike will jolt targets, or the initial kind of burst of the grenade will jolt targets. So incredibly strong pair with lightning grenades there when you're able to do it. Pulse grenades, 121 second cooldown. A Spark of Magnitude will give you 2 extra pulses. I believe that brings it up to a total of 8. This is the highest total damage of any arc grenade on a single target area here, especially with the Spark of Magnitude. In this case, we were talking about those extra pulses. You can also stack pulse grenades with other pulse grenades, which is actually something that not every grenade can do, which is important to keep in mind. Touch of Thunder, damaging an enemy creates an ionic trace. This has a 1 second cooldown. This allows you to generate a lot of ionic traces on Titan, which is normally something that the Warlocks excel more at. Also, Titans, if you are ever thinking about using Armamentarium, I would definitely say that Pulse Grenades is the place to do it, with all the ways that you can build into enhanced cooldowns and stuff like that. We've got Skip Grenades, 105 second cooldown, 4 drones, impact, and explosive damage from each drone. And then Storm Grenades, 121 second cooldown. Spark of Magnitude will get an extra burst to your Storm Grenade. At base, this is like half of what Pulse Grenades are offering these days, which is something that's kind of gone back and forth for a long time. If you are on Titan and you're using Magnitude and Touch of Thunder, they can get close to a Pulse Grenade, but you have to keep in mind that this is a much more wider area of effect, and you're dealing with 14 total bolts of lightning that would come down in some burst, and you'd have to hit every single one of those on the same target. So really going to be difficult to get that maximum amount of damage there. I think that Shinobu's Vow is a really interesting one. Cord, I'll just immediately pass it back to you here to talk about, what does Shinobu's Vow do, and why do you like him so much? Why do you like skip grenades?
Well, do we have an entire new episode here that I could gush about it? Yes, so Shinobu's Vow is definitely one of my top exotics, one of my favorites. It has been nerfed a few times, especially when it comes to PvP, but it's still a very great, like, S tier arc hunter exotic here. And yeah, Shinobu's Vow, it adds an extra drone. You get an extra charge of skip grenades, enhanced tracking, and this may not mean a lot in terms when you're listening to this and when we're reading it off a script, but 4.2% grenade regen for each drone hit. However, you do get, you've got 5 drones here, so 4 plus that extra drone. So if you can get as many hits as possible with skip grenades, then you'll get your grenade up back faster. If you stack that with grenade, with your mods that are giving you back grenade energy, thinking of grenade kickstart, thinking of some of the leg armor, innovation on orb power pickup. You get your grenade back. You've got your arms mods as well to really cycle in, getting your skip backs really fast. Pair that with firepower to get your spawning of orb of power. So if you've been in a fire team with me, where it's like, how have you managed to get 200 orbs in just a lowly strike? This is where I'm not using Liar's Handshake with the with heavy-handed. It's just as easy to do that as well. But this is where these huge numbers of 200 orbs have been spawned come from, and it's just from Shinobu's Vow. So Shinobu's Vow, fantastic exotic. I've still to play around with Lucky Raspberry and how that kind of interacts, because that's got a similar kind of style. Arc bolts kind of have that chaining 4 times, and then you can, if you're playing into the whole jolting and chaining that damage, picking up ionic traces, you can get your grenade back just as fast as Shinobu's Vow. But as things stands at this particular episode, Shinobu's is just up there when it comes to hunters. For warlocks, we do have an additional exotic here, Impetus.
Yes, so this is kind of a weird one, but it's worth pointing out. Getaway artist consuming an arc grenade. Any arc grenade summons a sentient arc soul and immediately gives you the amplified effect. And the sentient arc soul does grant 5% grenade energy once per burst upon damaging an enemy. The soul does not inherit grenade triggers, so it does not trigger the aspect shock or firepower mod, for example. So I did just want to bring that up as something that is still tied to arc grenades, even though it doesn't actually modify a particular arc grenade in any way. You're taking a grenade and turning it into something else that is useful in other areas. But yeah, that is, I suppose, an arc grenade exotic per some pretty loose definitions, but it's worth pointing out nonetheless. Yeah. Arc Souls, even more Arc Souls. Everybody loves Arc Souls. Everybody loves ionic traces. So go ahead.
I was going to just kind of ferry us onto which arc grenades would we want to chop up, get rid of, and which are our favorites here.
I'll start off and say that I think storm grenades have been nerfed down. They're not what they were when they came out. They completely dominated at first. Hoyle Arc Storm Grenade Titan was just insane. I really still just like them thematically. Like the idea of like throwing a storm cloud at the enemy and then watching all the damage rain down on them is still very satisfying, even if it is not nearly as strong of an option as it used to be. And pulse grenades with the amount of like ionic traces that you're able to generate on Titan just like way outweighs that as far as the meta conversation goes. Just where we're at the moment. I think I would say similarly like magnet grenades and flux grenades. I think that flux grenade is just mostly PvP focused, honestly, because there's just no scenario in which I would use a flux grenade that I wouldn't just rather use a pulse grenade in PvE. So, it's fine. Flux grenades can be their long cooldown PvP thing, but I think that if I'm going to chop one, it's going to be Arc Bolt, because it just does not seem to do anything that like Skip doesn't do better. Pretty much is how I feel about that. If I want something that I can kind of throw from a distance is going to hit a bunch of targets real quickly, I'm just going to go with Skip grenades, because to Court's point, they're just really good and they have so many little damage instances and all that stuff. I don't know. Court, what are you cutting? What are you praising? What are you chopping?
You're telling me you would get rid of arc bolt grenades? Okay.
Yeah, I am.
Court's gonna make a lucky raspberry build where he generates 3,000 orbs of power just to prove you wrong.
After this episode, I'm going straight to D2 armor picker. I don't want to necessarily say skip grenade because it's really good because of Shinobu's Vow, but they are still good even without. Pulse grenade's always been just such a staple. Again, it's a similar kind of vibe to Vortex grenade. Yeah, it doesn't have the whole kind of sucking in all the enemies, but I think it's just such a great burst potential. Flux grenade, yeah, I think for my choice it would have to be Flux grenade unless they added something more to it. In PvE, it's doing damage great, but that's it. And then it's got a huge cooldown. And yeah, you can play into the whole ionic traces, getting your grenade energy back faster. I just feel like you could do that a lot more sooner with other grenades that are doing better damage and better potential anyway. If they attach some sort of verb to flux grenade, and it's not something I want them to do to every grenade in terms of all the light-based grenades, but perhaps it gives you amplified if it kills, or it applies jolt for a very short period of time. But as it stands, it's just not for me. I've been using flashbang a lot recently for my kind of alternate non-Shinobu's Vow builds, and again, like suppressor, it's really doing a lot of work here. It's got almost the same radius. It's 8 meters instead of suppressor's 9. And blind is just such a great verb to use in the sandbox. Again, same kind of trigger of deactivating, kind of disabling all your ads that are not champions or bosses, and just being able to really make quick work of them. And Arc Sandbox, at least for hunters, is great for just jolting a whole room. So if you can blind everything, then jolt them, pretty easy, pretty standard. So yeah, for me, I think Flux Grenade, and for my, at least 2 anyway, Skip Grenade and Pulse Grenade.
I can't think of something that I would want to delete necessarily. Again, speaking from the Warlock perspective here, when I look at these grenades, it's more about what gives me more ionic traces. That is far and away what we excel at in the Arc sandbox. We got Fallen Sunstar, our exotic armor, and then we've got Cold Heart that you can pair with that for maximum ionic trace generation. We've also got Arc Souls too. Like we have a lot of different ways to deal damage and then also give ourselves grenade energy. So I kind of look at these in a light of like, I'll take really anything other than flashbang because they're going to generate damage. I'm going to kill something, especially when I have the ability to give all of these grenades the jolting effect, right? Something pretty much always dies whenever I throw the grenade. So I don't feel tied to any one of these in particular, especially since Warlocks don't have exotic armor or an aspect that directly modifies any of these, enhances any of these. So, Lightning, Pulse, Skip, Storm, love them all. I'm even, Arc Bolt's even fine, but I don't feel tied to any one of these necessarily. I don't feel strongly about any of them. I think that's probably, it's a bit more noticeable for Titans and Hunters because they have actual choices to make when it comes to their aspects, their fragments, and their exotic armor.
All right. You guys ready to move on into our couple of darkness subclasses here?
Yeah. Less to say about these ones. Noticeably less to say.
Yeah, these be much shorter. They have much fewer, just grenade variants and all that stuff, which I think is kind of interesting that when we get into the more recently designed subclasses, obviously we had 3.0s and that changed a lot of things, but these are definitely our most, Strand specifically is our newest subclass, most recently designed. And Strand has 3 grenade types. I believe it's the same for, same for Stasis. It's just 3 grenades, right? So let's get into it. Well, starting off with Stasis, we do have a couple of aspects to mention. We have Touch of Winter on the Hunter, enhances grenades in various ways, which we'll see in more detail as we go through the few grenades here. And then Bleak Watcher on the Warlock, which is an incredibly famous crowd control tool. Grenade cooldown is set to maximum, aka Glacier Grenade's 152 second cooldown when you equip it. But when you hold your grenade button, you convert your grenade ability into a stasis turret. The stasis turret, aka Stacy, automatically shoots a burst of 5 seeking projectiles at enemies within about 30 meters, applying 20 stacks of slow per hit. The stasis turret lasts for about 25 seconds, plus an additional 5 seconds, or potential 5 seconds there, has 150 HP, and possesses 67% damage resist until it's fired. Until it's fired. The burst lasts about a 3/4 of a second, and it refires every 2 seconds. So, incredibly strong. I'm sure a lot of you guys are all familiar with Bleak Watcher. Moving on to our fragments, we have Whisper of Chains. Being within 10 meters of a frozen enemy or a friendly crystal grants 40% damage reduction. This also grants 10 points to recovery. Okay, Impetus, what are our stasis grenade?
Well, there's just 3 of them. We'll start with Cold Snap, cooldown of 121 seconds. The Cold Snap grenade, when thrown, seeks out the closest enemy within 20 meters, applying freeze on proximity to an enemy, travels at 17 meters per second, and only lasts for 1 second. Freezing an enemy will release another Cold Snap chain. The grenade does bounce off of walls and ceilings. Warlocks, we do have an exotic armor tie-in with the Osmiomancy gloves that grants an additional Cold Snap charge. Cold Snap grenades do have better tracking. They travel 35% further and grant grenade energy upon hitting or freezing an enemy. The next grenade up is Dusk Field, a cooldown of 91 seconds. This detonates on impact, applying 20 stacks of slow for 2 seconds at a minimum, and creates a slowing field for, again, a minimum of 7 seconds. The slowing field deals 1 damage and applies 10 stacks of slow for a minimum of 2 seconds every 0.35 seconds. Hunters have an exotic armor tie-in to this grenade in the Renewal Grasps. The Dustfield Grenade's slowing field is granted a 25% increased radius. While inside a Duskfield Grenade slowing field, the enemies deal 50% reduced damage. Allies are granted 25% damage resist, and when combined with the Touch of Winter aspect, the stasis crystal size increases from medium to large. The slowing field radius is increased by 50% to a total of a 75% increased radius. It is a big ol' snow globe. Our final grenade type is the Glacier Grenade type, 152 second cooldown, and creates 5 large stasis crystals for 15 seconds. And with Touch of Winter, that arrangement turns into a circle with a hollow center. A little bit harder to say what would we get rid of when there's only 3 options. I don't think any of us hopefully don't feel so strongly about the stasis grenade type, so we'd say chuck one of these bad boys out, just give me down to 2. How do we feel about the variety and the efficacy of the Cold Snap, Duskfield, and Glacier Grenades? Court, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so these are a lot more ingrained in with the subclass keywords. So obviously Cold Snap is all about freezing. Dustfield is all about slowing. Yes, it can freeze, but its main gimmick here is to slow things down. And then obviously Glacier plays into the whole crystals and spawning them. I just want to highlight for hunters for the Touch of Winter. So we've already mentioned Dustfields there, but Cold Snap will chain up to 4 times and create a small crystal whenever a seeker detonates. And for Glacier, it forms a hexagonal and creates an additional crystal instead of a line of crystals. Yeah, like I'm pretty happy with all 3 of these. There's been a lot of kind of during the year of Beyond Light, we had a lot of turmoil in terms of where all these grenades positioning themselves, but I think they've positioned themselves quite well now. Glacier has a lot more kind of utility now. I think that was the weakest out of the 3 when it originally launched. Now they've made it a lot more kind of synergistic with the sandbox. We've got all the aspects and fragments available to us. Speaking of which, 2 to mention here, Shards, which gives you 500% additional base grenade energy, regen rate for 6 seconds per crystal shattered. So if you wanted to pair that with Glacier. Also gives you that plus 10 resilience. And then Torment, which is the inverse to what we'll talk about with Strand very shortly here, is receiving damage from any enemy grants 4% grenade energy. And while you're at critical health, the amount is increased to 16.7% grenade energy. And that's a 1 second cooldown upon taking damage. But yeah, I'm quite happy with the grenades here. Hunters have had quite a roller coaster ride with Renewal Grasps over the last 2 years. Obviously, you can stack that with Touch of Winter as well, so you can get a bigger old snow globe. But it's in a really good spot now. And yeah, I think, to me, I'm not sure if this is a critique or if it's a praise, but each grenade kind of is focused on each subclass. For Hunters, obviously, Dustfield. For Warlocks, it's Cold Snap. And for Titans, it's Glacier. Do you guys feel that's more of a hindrance than a help? Like, obviously, me as a hunter using Glacier Grenade, I can still do that because I could shatter dive, play into that whole kind of synergy. Not too sure about Cold Snap because I don't have as many avenues to kind of play around with that compared to Warlocks. Saint, how are you vibing with that?
I definitely think that is that's the intention, and I'm actually okay with it being it's so limited because their functionality is so drastically different, right? It's like you can just see this design intention change of we're going to go from 8 grenades to 3, but they're each going to be like so different from each other that it's going to cover a wide area. I think it originally was more limiting, but now that things have just changed and evolved so much over time, as Stasis Unlocked, things have been updated in the sandbox and all that kind of stuff, it's allowed us to have more access to other grenades. So for instance, you have Dustfield. Dustfield is the lowest cooldown on this list, 91 seconds versus 121 for Cold Snap, 152 for Glacier. And then, obviously we talked about Cold Snap. You can get the 2 grenades for your Ozymancy, but then they're defaulting to Glacier's cooldown. I've started to late last year that I started really using Hoarfrost Z more to be able to capitalize on the I still want my Stasis crystals and shards, which is like what the whole Titan kit is running off of. But then you can capitalize on the fact that Dustfield is dealing with overload champions so well these days, like so strong. Yeah, you can shatter a Glacier for an unstop, but man, Dustfield grenades in the in-game I feel like are crazy strong for really controlling a crowd. Multiple small enemies, one unstopped champion, an overload champion like Dustfield can do it all. And I definitely think that is my preferred grenade these days because of the other pieces that like kind of allow me to work around the size of that kit in other ways. Impetus?
Yeah, that's a good point there, Court. I was thinking Warlocks did get kind of an attempt to branch out into shatter damage with the Ballador's Wrathweaver's exotic armored gauntlets. The Shockwave, the heavy attack of our Winter's Wrath super, deals increased shatter damage, which would incentivize you to maybe run something like Glacier Grenade or weapons with Headstone, maybe a combination of both to make sure that you do have a lot of stasis crystals around when you do eventually pop your super. I don't think that fantasy makes a whole lot of sense given the amount of investment required for the trade-off there. But it does seem like they are trying to branch out, and they're using maybe exotic armor as kind of that avenue for exploration. But yeah, we definitely were prioritized into cold snaps. I think pretty heavily when Osmiomancy gloves came out, especially given that it allows for an additional Bleak Watcher turret to exist. That is a pretty powerful fantasy and a very, very enticing fantasy. Hard to give up, right? Hard to give up when you have a way to really lock down a room in a more engaging way than throwing a Dustfield grenade. I don't know quite how you want to compare those two, but Bleak Watchers are very, very powerful in the right spot when they're set down. You can really lock down a hallway or a spawn point and really any PvE content with them. So yeah, I think it would be cool to have access maybe to shattering in a way that I don't currently on Warlock, but what I have right now is pretty strong, and I think I get the sense that all three of us would probably prefer that Stasis just receives some general buffs first before we start exploring what a shatter build might look like on on Warlock, or a slow build on Titan, or freeze build on Hunter. So there's a few other things that we'd want to see addressed first before we really get to dip into every single verb. But the fact that they do all cycle together is really nice, right? Slow into freeze into shatter. That is not the case for any of the other elements. And I think that's a pretty unique fantasy, and one that, again, just it needs a little bit more love because it's getting outclassed right now with some of the other elements. But it's a very unique flavor to Stasis for sure.
Well, they did mention we're getting at least some buffs for season 23.
That's right.
I think the grenades are probably the strongest part of the Stasis sandbox right now, but also, to your point about playing into the keywords of slow, freeze, and shatter is very natural, and I don't think they necessarily need to change too much when it comes to that kind of 1, 2, 3 stage, but Stasis itself obviously does need some love for all the classes, but when it comes to, we've only got 3 grenades here, and they all have been prioritized for each individual subclass, and I think I am okay with that. I do want to see more kind of utility for hunters to get cold snap and for titans to use Dustfield. But like in my eyes at the moment, we're kind of in an okay place because hunters can shatter dive and utilize glacier grenades and have a lot of fun in your kind of low end and middling type of content, because shattering crystals is a lot of fun. You do a lot of damage as well. But yeah.
Definitely. We've got one more element here, and then we're done here. That's, of course, the brand new one, Strand. Got 3 grenade types again here, but we do also have some aspects and fragments modifying them. So starting with our aspects, hunters have the Widow's Silk aspect. This is the grants an additional grenade charge, which is very, very nice here. That applies to all of the grenade types. Warlocks have Mind Spun Invocation. That enhances your strand grenades here. We'll actually just go through these changes right here instead of waiting to get into the grenade types. For the grapple, a grapple melee will create 3 threadlings. For the threadling grenade, you can consume it to grant 5 perched threadlings. And for the shackle grenade, you can consume it to grant Weaver's Trance for 25 seconds. Killing an enemy while in Weaver's Trance creates an explosion, which will suspend enemies if they take damage from the explosion. Moving on to our strand fragments, we have the threads here, just 2 of them that directly deal with grenades. Thread of Ascent, grenade kills, refill your weapon, grants 30 handling, 40 reload, a 0.925 reload duration multiplier, and plus 30 airborne effectiveness for 15 seconds. There is a 4-second cooldown between ammo refills. That also comes with a plus 10 mobility stat bump as well. Thread of Generation is our other one, dealing damage. Any damage grants grenade energy for each damage instance, and the gains will vary depending on the source. That does come with a minus 10 discipline malice. All right, Saint, what are the strand grenade types?
Again, we've only got 3. We're starting off with the grapple grenade, 82-second cooldown. Replaces that grenade with a good old grappling hook that you can attach to just about anything and will even transfer its momentum. Melee, while in the air, performs a grapple melee. Grapple melee counts as both a grenade and melee ability. Ashes to Assets mod grants 50% less super energy when a grapple melee is used, and other mods do not function twice. So heavy-handed and firepower mods, only one of those will activate, unlike when it originally dropped. It was really crazy, but either way, you can pick either one of the mods in your kit, and they will function based off of that grapple melee, which is really, really nice to have that flexibility. Grappling to a tangle fully refunds the grapple energy. Next up, we have Shackle Grenade, the longest cooldown of any grenade type of 152 seconds, which is also the same for Threadling Grenade, which we'll talk about in just a second. But Shackle Grenade throws out that bolo kind of projectile, releases an explosion on impact that deals a small amount of damage, and applies suspension in a radius. You'll kind of see it spread in a couple of other smaller projectiles right when it hits, and anything that is caught in that radius of a few meters will be suspended. Threadlings throw a projectile that spits into 3 threadlings. Threadlings track towards any enemy within 20 meters and explode on contact. Warlocks got a lot going on with threadlings. I'm just gonna have immediately pass it back to you real quick to talk about what all is going on with warlocks and their exotics, their aspects fragments.
Absolutely, yes. Lots going on here. So Threadlings, unlike the other 2 classes on a Warlock, they return after traveling 14 meters. If they cannot find any enemies, they will perch on us, and we can hold up to 5 Threadlings max. They are individually released upon dealing weapon damage or scoring melee hits. There is a 0.5 second cooldown between the releases. This also interacts with Weaver's Call. You can deploy all of your perched threadlings this way, and it also interacts with an exotic armor that we have, the Swarmers. That means that all of our threadlings apply the Unravel verb. And threadlings from the grenade ability can interact with grenade-triggered mods. Only those threadlings, I should say. And of course, we're referring to, say, firepower as an example. Threadlings that become perched or any others do not trigger those interactions. The others there being, say, swarmers, for example. When we shoot a tangle or destroy a tangle, the threadlings generated from that do not trigger any grenade-triggered mods. So lots going on there with the Warlock specifically. Probably no surprise. I'm a big fan of the Threadling Grenade as a Warlock. I know there's a common complaint that they don't do enough damage. I think some people are a little frustrated that the Summoner Fantasy that was pitched to the Warlocks pre-Lightfall doesn't quite feel any different, say, from Arc Souls or Bleak Watchers or, the new Hellions coming in the final shape. It feels like we have a little ball, a little vaguely spherical shape for every element now. The Summoner Fantasy doesn't seem quite as unique. I can see some of that, but again, Threadlings are by far the most advanced type, and the fact that they do come back to us if they cannot find it in the enemy is really nice. They're by far the most portable summon that we have, and I'm always going to be happy for a little bit of a damage increase to Threadlings. We did just get that recently here. I still find them to be useful in pretty much everything except for Grandmaster Nightfalls, and if they don't one-shot everything in Grandmaster Nightfalls, I'm okay with that. In fact, I think my fire team would be quite disappointed if I could single-handedly mow through an entire room with me and my green little friends. So that to me is okay. I've used this in raids and dungeons on the normal difficulty. I haven't yet taken my Strand kit into a master difficulty, but I'll make sure to try that with Crota's End as we make our way through the various challenges. It's okay to me. I've never once been like, man, I really need to just swap off of Strand entirely. Yes, there's certainly utilities for grapple and shackle grenade types, of course, on Warlock, which I think is where Strand kind of differentiates itself from Stasis in that all of the grenades have really good uses on all of the subclasses, and I think that's actually a strength of the element in general. But yeah, I love Threadlings. I wish I could have more of a reason to use them on my Hunter and my Titan, but yeah, no complaints there. How do you guys feel about the grenade types, Court?
So I think it's almost similar to Stasis, where yes, each subclass has specialized grenades. And it's the same here in a way. Obviously, Threadlings are the Warlock thing, Shackles are the Titan thing, and then Grapples are obviously the Hunter thing. Obviously, Hunters do have that additional grenade charge, so we can spawn multiple Threadlings ourselves. We can use multiple Shackles, and we can obviously use Grapple a lot, especially if we're like chaining it. But I feel like while it's great, I really love all the grenades here. I feel like they could have maybe went down the path of Titans using Shackle. They get an extra kind of interaction. Nothing too crazy. Similar to like the Warlock interaction where, Threadlings can return and you can redeploy them. A little bit something for Titans for Shackle. In a way, Hunters have the thing with Grapple, and that's their main thing. And, you guys know, at the start of this year, I was using Grapple a lot. I was doing the Grapple melee. Hunters obviously have that big priority when it comes to using Grapple. But for Titans, I feel like they could have used just a little bit, just a tiny interaction with Shackle just to kind of boost it up. I don't know if that's how you feel, Saint.
I mean, they basically gave you a Bant Leap. And they were like, hey, you want a special suspension interaction? You got to go down and get your exotic, which is fine. I mean, we could have moved that upstream one level, right, and right into the subclass, like you're talking about, with some kind of an aspect that you could pair with Drinker's Lash. Maybe that would give you, Woven Mail on suspension, which would be cool. But yeah, Bant Leap is still out there if you want to go down that route. And I think recently, a Suspend obviously got really nerfed hard, and Shackle Grenade has lost a little bit of its allure this season. Shackle Grenade's still really strong, but I have started to gravitate a little bit more towards the Grapple Grenade on my Titan recently because of Banner of War. So Banner of War, I'm not even going to start on listing out the detail of everything about how it works, but you get a sword or a melee kill and it buffs your healing waves. Basically, you're getting waves of healing and you are getting increased sword damage, is what everybody talks about. But what people aren't talking about is the 40% increase to melee damage when you have Banner of War up. We were just talking at the beginning there about grapple melee. it's really pretty easy to start getting some kills. You get a tangle, you pick that tangle up, you throw it into the crowd, and as soon as you're getting there with your Banner of War up, you have 40% increase on your melee damage. That is really going to go a long way. You can start going even further, pairing this with things like Synthesefs, which is getting tacked on to that grapple melee. 1-2 punch shotgun shots you can even use if you time correctly with that grapple melee. So I have started to use grapple grenade more because it just becomes another melee ability, more or less, and a really easily cooldown driven melee ability. So kind of not exactly, I think, was what it was originally like written for, but you can just use this in such a Titan way that it becomes completely just about how can I use as many melee abilities, punch as many things as possible. And I got to tell you, it's real strong these days.
Yeah, the picture of a Titan grappling around with the Banner of War flag on their back is quite something. Speaking from a double-upped grapple hunter here.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, actually, how that's kind of it's kind of a fork in the path, and with stasis, things are still quite prioritized to each grenade, to each subclass, whereas now that shackle grenade's no longer that potent, which, suspend the keyword definitely needs to get brought down. We all agreed to that kind of point. But seeing shackle grenade kind of going down the list, and then obviously threadlings are to your warlocks, grapple is to your hunters, but also to your titans. It's very curious how that's happened. Which is why I would love to see a kind of unique interaction with shackle grenades for Titans, something just a little bit extra. And just seeing you create flying around with Banner of War and grapple it's both interesting in terms of it's not the same as stasis, but also, well, there's your little kind of neat little interaction playing around with the increased melee damage that you get for grapple, get the Banner of War, and then you're kind of self-sufficient with the grapple melee.
I feel like the hunter watching the Titan grapple everywhere is big time. Like they gave this guy a license type of energy, like they let this guy drive. Really? Okay.
But I've got 2 grapples.
Still the expert. Still the expert.
Yeah. All right. Impetus, you got any final thoughts here?
No, nothing additional to add. Love all 3 of the strand grenades. Definitely new fantasies. Really shook up the sandbox when we first got them. Kind of excited to see how they get enhanced or tweaked, maybe with additional exotic armors in the future going forward, or any actual direct ability changes. But yeah, very fun fantasies for all 3 of those, which is something that I don't think we can necessarily say for the light-based grenade types. Yeah, we've got the essentials on Strand, and I'm happy for that.
All right, so we've got some miscellaneous kind of exotics, just kind of that are not really under any specific category here. So first up here is the Hunter. Obviously, Mothkeeper's Wraps. If you've been yelling at your speaker, wondering why haven't you spoke about this? Well, 2 things. We're saving it here, but also we spoke about this back in episode 75, so I won't go to too much detail here. So it replaces grenade with a Moth Cage grenade. You get 3 if you're using Widow's Silk. Moth Cage grenade overrides your current grenade cooldown to 73 seconds. And all the kind of interaction with moths, we've already spoke about that before. And obviously it's got that unique synergy with X-Dirus as well. For the Titans, we've got Arbor Warden. Technically, it's a very different type of grenade here, but it's a grenade nonetheless. On class ability usage, it replaces your grenade with a Barronade. The Barronade spawns a barricade on impact, and that barricade inherits aspects such as Bastion and Drenching Lash and that kind of stuff. Titans also have Armamentarium, which is your classic, you get an extra grenade charge, and that's it. Titans obviously have the much superior chest exotic, that's Heart of Inmost Light. That's your decreased ability cooldown time and increased ability damage. It's 400% additional grenade regen rate at 1 stack, or 800% at 2. And of course you get that 20% grenade damage increase at 1, or 35% at 2. Hallowfire Heart recently buffed in this season. That's 350% additional base grenade regen while your super is charged. While standing in a sunspot, solar kills generate sunspots. And Saints put here in the script, it's ... okay. We'll come back to you, Saint, just to kind of get some vibes with that in a second here. Finish off this list here. Warlocks, we've got Verity's Brow. Weapon kills with a matching subclass element grant a stack of death throws for 11 seconds, up to 5 stacks. Once that buff expires, all the stacks disappear. Death throws grants the following per stack: 50% additional base grenade regen rate, that's 250 at 5 stacks, and 20% increased grenade damage, and that's 100%, that's double damage at 5. On grenade usage, while Death Throws is active, allies within 20 meters receive Feel the Flame buff, which grants 10 times grenade regen speed for 5 seconds. It's quite crazy, that buff. I know folks do talk about Verity's Brow quite a lot, but don't often see it in the PvE sandbox a lot. Finally, we've got 2 weapons. Would be amiss to miss out here. Not Foe Tracers. It's the sidearm. I've put Foe Tracers in the script.
I had you wondering what you were mentioning when you put that in there. Oh, what are you called? Big old Halo sidearm.
Yes, it's the Halo sidearm.
Forerunner.
Forerunner, there we go. Put that in the blooper reel. Forerunner's Fragmentation Grenade counts as a proper grenade, despite being kinetic. Will activate any effect associated with grenade kills or ability usage, and deals the same damage as a full damage Void Spike Grenade. So if all the damage ticks apply to an enemy from a Void Spike, which is one of the highest, it's around about the same damage. So we're talking quite a serious amount of damage with the Fragmentation Grenade from Forerunner. And finally, we've got Tessellation and its Grenade Rocket. So transform your grenade into an explosive projectile. It does pretty high damage, comparable if Izanagi's Empowered Shot. Kills cause a subclass matching chain reaction. Obviously, it synergizes with whatever element you're on. If you want to pair that with Widow's Silk, you can get multiple of those charges again. And then obviously kills with Tessellation provide 20% grenade energy, so it's a nice little loop there. All right, final thoughts. Saint, I'll come back to you about Hallowfire Heart and your particular comment here.
Yeah, it's really pretty good in some niche scenarios where you want to be throwing like a lot of healing grenades or whatever the case may be. You're trying to keep a team alive, you're trying to capitalize on your roaring flames, but there's just not really a lot of scenarios in which, unless you're using specifically healing grenades on a solar subclass and you want to have a ton of them up, like you should just use Heart of Endless Light instead. Not only is it going to give you that increased cooldown for empowerment times 1 or 2, it's also going to give you that 20 or 35% increased damage straight up on your grenades, and stacking something up like, you got Heart of Endless Light going and you got Roaring Flames. Even if it's just times 1 from your melee, let's say, you're getting 20% increase from Hoyle, and then you're getting a 73% increase in your grenade damage from Roaring Flames. Or again, if you're just on Arc, it's really easy to throw a barricade, hit a melee attack, and then you've got a pulse grenade for 5 seconds going at 35% damage increase, which is just ridiculous, frankly.
I don't have a whole lot to say about Verity's Brow. It's a very niche option. It can be quite powerful when you really build into it. I know that folks use it for low person challenges, quickly clearing through a boss's health once you do get the death throws up to 5 stacks. And of course, it's also great for when you have, your allies next to you, getting that massive amount of grenade regen speed for whatever grenade-based stuff they might be using. It's just kind of hard to recommend for a general activity build. I think it's very much suited to specific encounters, specific activities, trying to go through those when you need a lot more out of your grenade than you normally would. So yeah, it's tough. I would much rather push the average Destiny player into something like Controverse Hold over Verity's Brow, even though Verity's Brow can be a very successful and powerful tool. Forerunner's the Rock. I forgot about that it can deal the same damage as a full damage Void Spike grenade. It is strong. I got to use it more in PvE. Every time we have a champion mod for sidearms, I kind of just roll my eyes and move on, but I keep forgetting that also affects Forerunner, and Forerunner is a very powerful weapon. So I'll keep my eyes peeled for another sidearm I can't believe I'm saying this. I'll keep my eyes peeled for another champion sidearm mod, and then only use it for Forerunner, and make that very clear in the episode that I'm only recommending it for Forerunner. So
Well, you can use it right now with Radiant for stunning barriers.
or any other weapon with Radiant.
With Forerunners, the Rock fragmentation grenade, when I read that it activates any effect associated with grenade kills and ability usage, I was just like, oh wow, okay, this is originally, I think way back yonder when I was like, okay, this is actually pretty good exotic in terms of a sidearm. It does really great damage potential, but I wasn't really thinking about the grenade because I thought that thing doesn't interact with anything. Like, why would it? But with it being currently the only kinetic grenade, and it interacts with your kind of grenade-based mods and stuff, then I think I'm with you. But I think I'm going to utilize that a little bit more often. Two exotics here, obviously, that completely change our grenades into something completely different here. Obviously, Mothkeeper's Wraps. Yeah, Arbor Warden as well. I know we've not been that friendly with Arbor Warden just because it doesn't really have much potential in PvE. But yeah, I want to see more exotics like this. This is where, yes, I want to remove some of the older light-based grenades. But if we're getting really unique exotics that completely change your grenade, including Arbor Warden, because it is a complete different grenade in terms of utility, I want to see more of that. Hunters and Titans obviously getting the first batch here, but it's really great to see that really unique exotics.
I agree. All right, folks, anything else before we round out the episode? A lot of information here. I did not think this was going to take us 2 hours, but there are a lot of grenades and there's a lot of interactions. Surprise, surprise. I think stuff that has been developed over many years at this point.
Very, very good topic. And again, hats off to Impetus, who kind of suggested this pretty much at the last moment here. We weren't really sure what we were going to talk about this week, but I think this has been a very great kind of 101 kind of back to the basics, just kind of fleshing out all the grenades here. It's a really great topic.
Agreed.
It's wild to think about. When we first started doing the show, we did not have access to all of these grenades. The 3.0s had yet to happen. So definitely feels good to return to this topic now that there's a lot more for everyone to dive into when it comes to grenades. But yes, that will conclude the first episode of PvE University. Thank you so much for listening to episode 80. Do also want to shout out our audio engineer, Autodidaktos, for his continued work and support behind the scenes. We are not going to be doing these basics episodes consecutively here. There probably will be spread in between a few other things. So I think next week we are planning to break down the 2 new Battleground GMs with the Rotator coming up next week. After that, we probably will return to some more basics episodes in the following weeks, but we haven't worked out those topics yet, just quite yet. We're kind of still tossing around a few ideas, but stay tuned. We are going to be going over all sorts of content, trying to present it in a very easy to understand educational format so that you do go into the final shape with more knowledge and hopefully a better player in the PvE sandbox. Until then, my name is Impetus. You can find me by that name in Destiny and in Discord. Court, where can our listeners find you?
Yep, you can find me over on various social media websites as Court Projects, Discord as Court Projects as well. And you can find my spreadsheets amongst many other applications, spreadsheets, documentation to enhance your Destiny experience over on the Destiny Massive Breakdowns website or the Destiny Spreadsheets link tree. Saint, where can we find you?
My name is Saint Kabir. You can find me by Saint_Kabir pretty much on every social media site, or hanging out in that Massive Breakdowns Discord server, or in-game. If you think that we are way overvaluing or undervaluing your favorite grenade or exotic, we would love to hear from you. Until next week, thanks for listening to PvE.